Asterisk asterisk, your father has gone mad and won't let us in. Asterisk asterisk. The words hit the quiet street like a slap. I stood just behind the solid wooden door of my new villa, my hand still resting on the handle, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they might hear it through the walls. Outside, my son-in-law's voice rose again, louder this time, sharper, soaked in mockery. Laughter followed. Not my daughter's laughter, but unfamiliar voices, friends, strangers, suitcases scraped against the stone steps of my house, my asterisk house, like they already owned it. I closed my eyes. This villa had been my dream for 27 years. 27 years of waking before sunrise, of skipping meals, of wearing the same old shoes until the soles peeled away. 27 years of telling myself, just a little more, for her, for my daughter. Every brick of this house had been paid for with restraint, with loneliness, with promises I made to myself when her mother died and left us alone in this world. And now they stood outside it like tourists. Open the door, Dad. My daughter finally said. Her voice was impatient, not worried. Why are you making a scene? A scene. I almost laughed at the cruelty of that word. I looked at myself in the mirror near the entrance, gray hair I hadn't noticed growing so fast, tired eyes. A face that had aged quietly while everyone else lived loudly. I didn't look mad. I looked exhausted. Who are those people with you? I asked through the door, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. There was a pause. Then my son-in-law answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Friends. We told them we'd stay here for a month. Big house, plenty of space. Don't be selfish. Selfish, that word opened a floodgate inside me. I remembered selling my father's land so my daughter could study abroad. I remembered standing in the rain outside a bank, waiting for a loan approval so her wedding could be grand enough for society. I remembered sitting alone at festivals, my phone silent, telling myself she was busy, that married life was demanding, that fathers must learn to step back. Not once had I complained, not once had I asked for repayment, and yet here I was, being called selfish for wanting peace in the home I built with my remaining years. I was not informed, I said quietly. You did not ask. My son-in-law scoffed. Since when does family need permission? You live alone anyway. What else do you do here? Talk to the walls. The laughter came again. This time my daughter didn't stop it. That hurt more than the insult. I opened the door just enough for them to see my face. The smiles faded slightly. Perhaps they expected guilt or embarrassment or surrender. Instead, they saw something else. No, I said, you cannot stay here. Silence fell, thick and stunned. My daughter stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying. I replied, my voice trembling now but not breaking, that this is my home, and you will not enter it like this, with suitcases, with strangers, with entitlement. My son-in-law's face darkened. So this is how you treat your own daughter, after everything we've done for you. I almost asked what they had done, but I stopped myself. I knew the answer, occasional phone calls, empty visits, remembering me only when something was needed. I have done enough, I said, more than enough. My daughter's eyes filled with tears not of understanding, but of wounded pride. People are watching, she whispered, you're embarrassing us. There it was, not Dad, are you okay? Not Dad, why are you hurt? Only us. Something inside me finally collapsed, and something else stood up in its place. I am not your hotel, I said. I am not your bank, and I am not invisible. My son-in-law stepped forward, anger blazing. You've changed. Money has gone to your head. You really have gone mad. I smiled sadly. No, I have finally come back to my senses. Then, with hands that shook but did not hesitate, I closed the door. The lock clicked. Outside, voices exploded shouting insults, disbelief. My daughter cried out my name. My son-in-law cursed me. Someone kicked the gate. I leaned my back against the door and slid slowly to the floor. My chest burned, tears came unstoppable, humiliating, long overdue. I cried for the little girl who used to run into my arms. I cried for the years I gave without keeping anything for myself. I cried for the man I had been quiet, obedient, endlessly forgiving. But beneath the pain, there was something else, relief. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. Outside, the noise slowly faded. Suitcases were dragged away. Engines started. The street returned to silence. Inside the villa, the silence felt different, cleaner, heavier, honest. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked through the rooms I had built with my sacrifices. Sunlight poured through the windows. The walls did not judge me. They simply stood, strong and patient. That night I slept alone in my new home, and though my heart ached, I knew one thing with certainty. Asterisk, asterisk, that door did not just close on them. It closed on the man I used to be. Asterisk, asterisk, silence has a strange way of echoing. The morning after I closed the door on my daughter, I woke up before dawn, the habit of decades refusing to loosen its grip on me. For a moment I forgot what had happened. Then the memory returned like a slow bruise, dull at first, then aching deeper with every breath. My phone lay on the bedside table. No messages, no missed calls. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or abandoned. I made tea and sat by the wide glass window overlooking the small garden I had planted myself. The plants were still young, fragile, their roots barely settled into the soil. I realized, with a bitter smile, that they resembled me more than I liked, newly placed, uncertain, but trying to grow in peace. By noon, the silence broke, not with an apology, with accusations. My phone buzzed continuously. Calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Messages from numbers I barely recognized. Every one of them carried the same tone, wrapped in false concern and sharp judgment. Asterisk, what happened to you? Asterisk, asterisk, why would you treat your own daughter like that? Asterisk, asterisk, they said you insulted them in front of everyone. Asterisk, asterisk, people are saying you've lost your mind since you got rich. Asterisk, I read the messages slowly, my hands steady, my chest tight. So this was the price of saying no. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Words felt useless against a story already rewritten without me. By evening, I finally saw it. My daughter's social media post, shared and reshared, decorated with carefully chosen pain. Asterisk, sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for forget who you are. Asterisk, the comments flooded in. Sympathy, support, praise for her patience, not a single question about my side. I closed the app. That night, memories came uninvited. I remembered her first day of school, how she had clung to my leg, terrified of the world. I remembered her feverish nights, when I sat awake beside her bed, counting her breaths like prayers. I remembered promising her mother, as she lay dying, that I would never let our daughter feel alone. I had kept that promise, perhaps too well. In keeping her world full, I had emptied my own. Days passed. The phone stopped ringing, not because people understood, but because they had decided. I became the villain of a story told without context. This selfish father, the arrogant old man, and for the first time I asked myself a dangerous question. Asterisk, when did my silence teach them I would accept anything? Asterisk, one afternoon I visited the lawyer who had helped me buy the villa. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see me. You should update your documents, he said gently, as if he already knew why I was there. Peace requires preparation. Those words stayed with me. I reviewed everything. My savings, my will, the accounts I had opened years ago in my daughter's name without thinking twice. Each signature I placed felt like pulling a thorn from my own skin. Painful, but necessary. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility to myself. I began spending time outside, long walks in the evening, conversations with neighbors who knew me not as a wallet, but as a man. I dusted off my old radio, the one my wife loved, and filled the house with music again. The villa no longer felt empty. Then, one evening, my daughter finally called. Her voice was cold, rehearsed. "Are you happy now?" I didn't answer immediately. "Happiness," I said slowly, "isn't the right word. I am awake." She sighed impatiently. "You've turned everyone against us. People think we're ungrateful." I almost laughed at the irony. "I said nothing," I replied. "The truth doesn't need shouting, lies do." There was a pause, a sharp inhale. "You could have just let us stay," she said. "None of this would have happened." That sentence hurt more than any insult. So this chaos, this humiliation, this heartbreak was my fault for having boundaries. I raised you to be strong, I said quietly. Not entitled, she hung up. That night I sat alone on the balcony, watching the lights of other homes flicker on. I wondered how many fathers sat inside them, swallowing their pain for the sake of peace, mistaking endurance for love. For the first time, I didn't feel proud of my silence. I felt ashamed of it, because my silence had taught them that my feelings were optional. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass door, older, yes, but clearer. The man staring back at me was no longer waiting to be chosen. He was choosing. And in that quiet realization, something shifted. If silence had cost me my dignity, then the rest of my life would be spent reclaiming it, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with truth. The price of silence had been heavy, but the cost of waking up would be worth it. Truth has its own timing. It doesn't rush. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It waits patiently, until lies grow tired of holding themselves together. Weeks passed. The storm around my name slowly lost its energy. People always need new stories to feed on, and I was no longer interesting enough to hate. Life in my villa settled into a rhythm I had forgotten, was possible morning walks, quiet meals, books left open without anyone interrupting me for favors. Then one evening the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I stood up. Pain has a familiar sound. When I opened the door, my daughter stood there alone. No friends, no suitcases, no confidence. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes rimmed red, makeup uneven as if she had wiped away tears too often and too roughly. She looked smaller. Behind her, my son-in-law sat in the car, staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, his pride bruised but not yet broken. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "Dad, can we talk?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked into the house slowly, as if entering a place that no longer belonged to her. She glanced around, noticing changes. The cleaner shelves, the new plants, the calm order. This wasn't the house she could take over. This was a home with rules. We sat at the dining table. She fidgeted with her hands. "Things haven't been easy." I nodded. "I know." She looked up sharply. "How?" "Because when people only value you for what you give," I said gently, "they disappear when you have nothing left to offer." Her lips trembled. The truth spilled out in fragments. The vacation that had turned into embarrassment, the friends who mocked them behind their backs, the investments my son-in-law had boasted about failed. Debts, calls unanswered, doors closed, the same door I had closed first. "We just needed help," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "And you shut us out." I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but firm. "No, I shut out disrespect. There is a difference." She flinched. I continued, not raising my voice, not softening it either. "You didn't ask. You announced. You didn't come as my child. You came as someone who believed I owed you comfort." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I didn't realize," she whispered, "that." I replied, "is the most dangerous thing about taking someone for granted. You don't realize until they stop standing where you left them." She cried then. Not the dramatic tears of accusation, but quiet, broken sobs of understanding. I watched her, my heart aching, but I didn't rush to fix it. Some pain must be felt fully before it can teach. The door opened again. My son-in-law entered. He didn't look at me at first. When he did, his voice was stiff. "We didn't expect things to turn out like this." I met his gaze. "You never expect consequences when you believe yourself entitled." His face flushed. "I spoke out of anger. You spoke out of character." I corrected. "Anger reveals, it doesn't invent." Silence fell heavy between us. Finally, he exhaled. "I was wrong. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. I stood up. Listen carefully, I said, looking at both of them. I am not punishing you. I am protecting myself. I explained everything then. The documents, the boundaries, the changes I had made. Not as a threat, but as a fact. My life was no longer open for occupation. If I help you, I continued, it will not be because you demand it or shame me into it. It will be because you respect me. My daughter nodded slowly, shame written across her face. I don't need you to love me loudly, I said softly. I need you to see me. That was when something broke in her, not just guilt, but illusion. She reached for my hand, hesitating before touching it, as if unsure she still had the right. I let her hold it. I forgot you were human, she whispered. I squeezed her fingers gently, and I forgot to remind you. They left that night without asking to stay. At the door, my son-in-law paused. Thank you for not turning us away. I answered honestly, I didn't turn you away, I just didn't kneel. After they were gone, I closed the door and leaned against it, not in pain this time, but in quiet strength. The truth had knocked back, and for the first time it had been heard. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it arrives softly wearing calm, carrying boundaries, and asking for nothing in return. After that night, my daughter didn't call every day. She didn't pretend everything was fine. Instead, she did something far rarer. She respected my silence. When she did visit, she came alone. No suitcases, no expectations. She asked before entering, waited for my answer, and thanked me for every cup of tea, as if it were a gift instead of a right. Each small gesture stitched something fragile back together, not the past, but a new beginning. My son-in-law changed too, though more slowly. Pride doesn't shatter easily, it cracks. He spoke less, listened more. When he looked at me now, it wasn't with challenge or superiority, but with caution, and something close to humility. I never reminded them of their failure. Life did that well enough. I helped them eventually, but on my terms. Not with blank checks or sacrifices that bled into resentment, but with guidance, connections, and clear limits. I refused to rescue them from every consequence. Growth needs friction, and they grew. So did I. The villa became more than a symbol of independence. It became a sanctuary. Mornings were filled with light and music, evenings with books and memories that no longer hurt as much. I invited friends over, laughed loudly without worrying who might judge the noise. For the first time, my happiness did not depend on being needed. One afternoon, my daughter sat beside me in the garden. The plants had grown taller now, stronger, their roots deep and sure. I used to think love meant you never say no, she said quietly. I smiled. Love that cannot say no isn't love, it's fear. She nodded, eyes glistening. I'm sorry I learned that so late. I placed my hand over hers. The important thing is that you learned it at all. There was no dramatic apology from the world. No public correction of the lies. Some relatives still believed their version of the story, and that was fine. Peace doesn't need witnesses. The greatest revenge I took wasn't against my daughter or my son-in-law. It was against the version of myself that believed suffering was proof of love. I no longer explained myself to those who benefited from misunderstanding me. I lived well. And in doing so, I taught them something no lecture ever could. That respect grows where boundaries are planted. That love survives only when dignity is protected. And that sometimes the sweetest revenge of all is a quiet life well lived. I closed the villa door one evening, not to shut anyone out, but to keep my peace in. And this time, the silence smiled back at me.